So the September ranked season has just started, or season 33, and I think most people can agree on what the best decks of this meta currently are. Fire King Snake Eyes, U-Belt. But let's say you don't want to play those decks for whatever reason, or I mean you're just bored of playing the same deck over and over again month after month. I want to highlight some underrated decks that are almost as, if not just as good as the top decks of this format, and that are very strong for climbing the rank ladder this format. So what I mean by underrated is I'm going to be looking at data gathered from the past few weeks from Untapped GG and Master Duel meta. I'm going to be looking at stuff like usage rates and popularity, and basically I want to highlight some decks that are lower on the popularity rankings or lower on the usage rating, but have high enough win rates that match or exceed some of the more meta picks of this format. So yeah, and I'm going to be showing deck lists for example deck lists for all the decks I mentioned, but again, these are just sample or example deck lists. I would recommend actually going to the Untapped GG and going to Master Meta and looking at all the deck lists that people have submitted or that are available on the sites yourself to just get a full sample of what everyone is playing in these decks. So let's get to the first one. So first off, I have to begrudgingly admit that despite my grievances with the deck, MathMech is an underrated deck that's a strong pick for this format. Now, according to the Untapped GG stats from all ladder games from Diamond and Master Ranked, MathMech has a similar win rate to both branded and tier. However, MathMech's usage is lower than both branded and tier elements in terms of tier elements. It is actually far lower. On Untapped GG, MathMech has about a third of the usage as Tierman does, and even among the popularity rankings on Master Duel Meta, MathMech has less than half the usage that Tiered has, and it still has decently less usage than Branded does, despite having a similar win rate. So I know this is a deck that's been around for a while, and a lot of people have got this idea that there's been too much power creep for this deck to be able to compete in the format, which, you know, it's partially true. The top decks have gotten stronger since MathMech was a tier 1 deck. I'm not going around calling MathMech a tier 1 deck or anything, but the reasons that made MathMech good before are still hold true today in this format. In fact, probably even more so. Mainly, this is like a hand trap metagame right now we're in. Boards, decks right now, like Fire King Snake Eyes and U-Belts particularly, either make boards that are just way too strong to play through with just engine if you don't open any hand trap to stop them, or they have to provide, they're like Fire King Snake Eyes where it's impossible to kill them through the board that they make, and they guarantee like 20 different ways of follow-up that will kill you on the next turns, so you have to really just snap their advantage engine before they can get it going with hand traps. And in a format where hand traps are good, MathMech obviously has a pretty big advantage there, because MathMech has room to run more hand traps and more non-engine than most decks in the format. You know, here in this deck list, for example, there's 16 slots that are just dedicated to hand traps, and realistically there's 17 non-engine slots. It's just one of them is used on a driver, which is, you know, not unique to just MathMech. This is far more hand traps than both U-Bell and Fire King Snake Eyes can run, and Voiceless Voice, and obviously more non-engine than branded and tier and decks like that can run. So yeah, it has the advantage of in a hand trap format, MathMech runs more hand traps than most decks can. In fact, I think really the only deck that can compete with MathMech in terms of how many hand traps it can run in a 40 card deck is something like Centurion. And MathMech, if obviously also in a hand trap meta where you're going to be playing against hand traps a lot, MathMech is one of the best decks at playing through hand traps. In fact, out of all the meta decks, like Fire King Snake Eyes, Yubel, Voiceless Voice, Branded, Tier, that Math Mech is as good at, if not better, at playing through hand traps than all of those decks are. Mainly because of this card called Math Mech Circular, which still to this day is one of the most ridiculous one-card starters ever printed. And it's one of the only one-card starters that beats a hand trap by itself. You know, as strong as Snake Eyes cards are, as strong as Yubel cards are, one hand trap does stop their one-card starters. You know, one Imperm or Valor or Ash does stop a Snake Eyes Ash. They have to draw an extender to play through that. Likewise, one Imperm Valor Ash does stop one Samsara D Lotus. You have to draw extenders in order to play through a hand trap. You don't really have to draw anything special to play through one of those hand traps with Math Mech Circular. Since, I mean, well, what are you gonna Ash? What are you gonna Imperm? You know, Circular sends Sigma for cost, okay? So if you want to hand trap the Circular, then you just make Allen Burschen and then search Super Factorial anyways. If you want to wait to hit the Allen Burschen, then well, the Math Mech Circular already searched Super Factorial. Like, one hand trap is not stopping a Math Mech player from getting to Super Factorial when they open Circular. And, which is, like, ridiculous, because it's not like Math Mech doesn't run extenders too. You know, Math Mech can also run extenders. And at that point, when you get into drawing extenders plus Circular with Math Mech, you're playing through 2-3 plus hand traps, you know, very, very easily. And you can still end on basically your almost entire, if not your entire end board. And what is that end board? The end board is still, for a one-card combo, it's still really strong. You know, Centurion is a one-card combo deck as well, like Math Mech. What Centurion ends on is 2 interruptions. One banish from Phalanx and one quick synchro into like something like a Blazer, right? Math Mech with one card gets a lot more than just 2 points of interruption. Since you get to a Terahertz, which Terahertz sends the Save Firm as a spell trap negate, you have a Super Factorial setup, and Super Factorial trades with 3 cards. It gets rid of a monster on field, it gets rid of a card in hand, and then it's another additional Omni negate. And by the way, this deck did get a small bit of support from the last pack in Enigmaster Pack Bid. And this is another thing you can send off Terahertz, because now you can send Pack Bid to just place and remove another monster your opponent controls. So overall, you can get up to like you can trade up to 1, 2, 3, 4, and Super Factorial trades with like 3 cards. So then you have the 2 interruptions from the Terahertz send. So you can literally trade with 5 cards from your opponent based off of just your 1-card combo. And that's not to mention that, you know, this deck runs a hell of a lot of hand traps, and along the way you're also making Hitso, and Hitso can potentially draw you into more hand traps. And yeah, it's to the point where a Math Mech board, if it full combos, it's really hard to play through. You're not expected to really play through that. And another great thing about Math Mech's end board is that your monster removal is non-destruction based. Your Laplacian and your Pack Book, they send and place monsters, you know, in the spell trap. So that means they don't trigger cards like your opponent's Fire King cards or your opponent's Yubel cards. And, you know, Pack Bid can potentially even, you know, troll some tier players and some branded players by placing like a Mirror Jade or a tier name in the spell traps zone and, you know, getting rid of it for basically the entire duel. Oh yeah. Now there are some downside or some weaknesses with Math Mech. One of them is that Maxi is Math Mech is really bad into Maxi, honestly. If you don't actively go for a line to play through Maxi, you're giving your opponent 3 to 4 cards. And even if you do like try to, you know, play around Maxi as best as you can, like send Diameter when you have a Subtraction or a level 4 already in hand, even then you're still giving your opponent minimum 2 cards, and then all you have is a Super Factorial that's importantly, it's not protected by the Save Worm, which means that if your opponent, any of the cards they drew happens to be a Call by the Grave, you lose all your interruptions and you have nothing. So yeah, Maxi, a particular weakness of Math Mech. Another weakness of Math Mech, well, Math Mech is very good at playing through most hand traps besides Maxi. One of the types of hand traps that Math Mech is not as good as playing through are Bystials. Specifically, going first, Bystials are one of the few hand traps that can stop or basically neuter a Math Mech combo by themselves without needing strong combinations of other hand traps. You know, you can, for example, just hit the Sigma out of the grave with the Bystial, and if your opponent doesn't have any extenders, then they can't combo at all. But what's even a safer thing to do is just wait for your opponent to do their full combo and just hold your Bystial for the super factorial. That way, when they go flip the super factorial, you're guaranteed to block the super factorial from happening, and super factorial by itself is 3 interruptions, so you're cutting off 3 interruptions with just 1 Bystial. Even if some builds are going for like, you can run the Cyanide Conflict build with Microcolor and end on the conflict. Even if you go for this route of Math Mech, it's still weak to Bystials in that they can simply Bystial your diameter out of the grave during the end phase, and then you're forced to use your Terahertz to send, instead of sending something like a Save Worm or a Packbit as another form of interruption, you have to send another Math Mech name, and because diameter is limited, the location you make off the super factorial will not have a negate, so the one Bystial is still trading with 2 of your interruptions as a Math Mech player. So if Bystials do get more and more popular as they've been trending to, then that is a legitimate, another legitimate weakness in Math Mech. And something else to keep in mind is that while most decks don't have this issue, Math Mech is one of the decks that does have a pretty a larger problem with Typhon than most decks do. Because you have to be careful, since your Terahertz is obviously going to have more than 3k attack. So yeah, Typhon does shut off your Terahertz, so if you haven't used your Terahertz to send a Packbit, for example, as an interruption, it's by the time Typhon comes out, it's too late. And it gets really dangerous if they can bait out your super factorial early, that way the location is already on the field. Then if they just get to any other monster, they can simply put a Typhon over it, attack over the location to, you know, get rid of that negate, and then bounce the Dark Fluid Terahertz, which cannot use its effects because Typhon is on the field, and then your entire board is gone from the Typhon. So yeah, be careful with that if you're playing Math Mech, but yeah. Still, Math Mech is still, I believe, one of the top 5 most underrated decks for this format. Now, next up is a deck that I continue to be amazed by just how underrated it is, and that's Rescue Ace. The only reason I didn't put this higher is because I know that I and most people deep down recognize that how good this deck actually is. Since it wasn't that long ago in the World Championship qualifier where Rescue Ace was the second best deck in the format, only to Fire King Snake Eyes. And since then, the only real changes the deck has gotten was that it lost 1 Airlifter and 1 Bonfire from the ban list, which, yes, it does matter, but it's not like Rescue Ace is in like some dire shortage of starters or anything. And like in terms of the stats, Rescue Ace is played less than Math Mech is, which to me is kind of unbelievable, because I think most people would agree that Rescue Ace is the stronger deck compared to Math Mech, and the stats and the win rate also support that. And the tournament players know this too, since Rescue Ace has enough tournament tops to be even considered tier 2 on Master Duel meta. Now, what I think this really is just that Master Duel players just don't like playing any fire deck that's not exactly Fire King Snake Eyes, because, you know, logically, you know, if you're not playing the best, you know, why play anything but the best fire deck? And hopefully I'll be making an argument for why you should. Now, Rescue Ace. What are the strengths of Rescue Ace? Well, again, this is a hand trap format, and Rescue Ace is very good at playing through hand traps, just because this is a deck, again, this is a fire deck, so you're playing a deck that has tons of extenders like Bellstar and Bonfire into Snake Eyes Poplar, all of which represent full combo by themselves. Neither of them which, you know, even require a normal summon. You still have 3 copies of Airlifter with Rhoda. You can use cards like 1-for-1 and Pod Prosperity, and like Pod Prosperity, you don't really care about half your extra deck, so this card is like free in this deck. You know, 1-for-1 also represents full combo. If you draw combinations of 2 cards, like Hydrant plus like Turbulence or Preventer, that can also get you to your combo and your Turbulence set 4. Emergency is very good at playing through hand traps and dodging targeted hand traps like Imperm and Valor. Also, the deck doesn't get blown out by any one single hand trap, unlike, the previous deck like Mathmech. And so, Maxi, not the biggest deal. At the end of the day, what your game plan, if you get hit by a hand trap like Maxi or Shifter, you can just Turbulence set 4, and boom, go from there. Giving them one draw off Maxi most of the time. At most 2, but you oftentimes you can just get away with 1, and then you still have like 2 to 3 interruptions off of that. And then Shifter, it hits your follow-up, but it also does not prevent you from just emergencying out a Turbulence and then setting forward that way. Droll, I mean, what is Droll? Bystials, what are Bystials? What are you gonna Bystial? Like my Link Rebo? Sure, go for it, right? And also, not just playing the hand traps, this deck is also good at playing the boards, because at the end of this day, this is a fire deck, so you have all of the broken fire options, such as Promethean, Zealantis, OTK, that basically solves any problematic monster. Monsters that can't be targeted or destroyed. Some other decks in the meta might struggle with cards like those, like Voiceless Voice or stuff like Centurion, but as long as you're not facing a true towers, basically Zealantis, Promethean Princess can out the majority of boards you play against, and the fact that you can just have an easy OTK option out of nowhere. Also, as mentioned, Bonfire, the Diabellstar being extenders that represent full combo that don't take the normal summon, because again, this is a fire deck. And also, cards Preventer is very good at playing the boards, because it's a card that provides extra link material after you link it off, so you just get more ways to just get into your Promethean Princess. Like you have Charmers that also represent. The fact that Promethean Princess is a toolbox is an option that you have is insane, because it's just not. It's fucking generic, so it's so easy to just threaten lethal with your cards. And again, Emergency, on top of playing through hand traps, it also plays through target disruption. If they try to pop one of your cards or like remove one of your monsters, you can chain Emergency to that, and then boom, their interruption basically didn't do anything. So yeah. Also, the end board, again, the end board is still very strong for rescues. It's the fact that it's back row makes it harder to interact with makes its end board harder to interact with compared to most decks, because most decks don't have as much spell trap removal or ways to interact with spell trap as they do monsters. So yeah, and Contain, Extinguish with Hydrant up, these can honestly end turns by themselves. Like, especially even against Jubel and Fire King Snake Eyes, if you contain their normal summon or extinguish one of their opponent extenders, then that's a huge, that is a huge deal. And oftentimes your end board can have stuff like SP or ideally Appaloosa. So oftentimes the only way they will have ways to play through your container extinguish is by trying to dodge it with stuff like their Grave Squirmers or Recurrence. And if you have an Appaloosa up, that basically checks their only outs that they have to your back row. So then you can guarantee that your back row goes through. And then you basically guarantee that you just stop them with your end board. Now, some cons are, as you can probably see by this deck list, it's at 46 cards. That's because the engine for Rescue Ace is just really large. The fact that you have to run these 4, arguably 5 Rescue Ace spell traps that you don't necessarily want to draw because you want to search them or you want to set them off Turbulence, means that you're playing quite a number of bricks in your deck. That also, Driver, aside from Gamma is a good card in this deck, you can easily bait out Gamma on your turn, but also, Driver is another brick. So this deck runs a lot of bricks. It's a large engine, so you're either running more than 46 cards to dilute how often you draw your bricks, but also, you're running a 46 card deck instead of a 40 card deck. There are consistency trade-offs there. Or if you want to get the deck down to 40, then you're really cutting into your non-engine space, because this deck at 46 cards is at 15 non-engine, which is already less than the Mathmech deck run. But if you really want to get this down to close to 40 cards, you're probably going to go into the single digits number of hand traps, like 9 or so hand traps, which, this deck's good at playing through boards, but you're not gonna win many games where you open 0 hand traps versus a U-Bell and Fire King Snake Eyes that goes full combo, right? So yeah, that is a trade-off in deck building. And also, even though this deck is very good into hand traps, one of the weaknesses of this deck is board breakers, more so than the other decks that will appear in this list. It's because you know, monster removal, it's like whatever, like stuff like Inperm or Dark Hole Regeki or Dark Ruler No More, that's fine, or like Droplets or Super Poly, but board breakers that hit your back row, like Evenly and Duster, they hurt this deck way more than they hurt other meta decks. You know, a lot of other meta decks honestly don't even care that much about Evenly or Duster, or they might not even have any relevant disruption from their back row in the first place. But Rescue Ace, getting hit by a Duster cleans out like 2 to 3 interruptions by itself. Getting hit by an Evenly cleans through all of your interruptions and hits your follow-up. So if we're ever get to a point where board breakers get more popular than hand traps, or you know, just get popular at all, then that's when I think Rescue Ace will get hurt the most. But as of right now, in this current format that we're in, I think Rescue Ace is a great choice and definitely underrated. Now, another deck that has seen a massive drop in play for seemingly no good reason that I can find is Pearly. So that same World Championship qualifiers where, you know, Rescue Ace was the second best deck, the third best deck was Pearly by a decent margin. And Pearly received even less hits from the ban list. All it got hit on the ban list was Pearly Lily going from 3 to 2, which unlike the Rescue Ace hits, barely matters at all in my opinion. All it does is that you go from 19 starters to 18 starters. You know, whoop-de-doo, right? Most of the time you were getting Pearly off of your quick play spells anyways. And most of the time you would rather get the Pearly off the quick play spell, because then you would be protected under Street because it was special something rather than normal something Pearly. Normal something Pearly is like a play that you do as a last resort, because that is the play that's weakest into hand traps. But like anyway, according to the stats, Pearly, it has like a better win rate than the previous 2 decks I've mentioned. In fact, according to the official Master Duel stats, it's actually the deck that has the single highest win rate on Master out of all the decks. That's right, it's not Snake Eyes, Fire King, it's not U-Bell, it's not Voiceless Voice. It's Pearly that has the highest win rate, according to the official Master Duel usage stats. And that's not the first time that has happened. Pearly has been, basically since it got Baby Noir however many months ago, it's been consistently a top 3 deck in terms of win rate on the Master Duel ladder. So yeah, and the fact that it's even lower usage than Rescue Ace by like sometimes almost a full %, or in this case, according to Master Duel meta, Pearly has the same popularity as Resonators, you know, despite Pearly being one of the winningest decks in the game and Resonators not being so. But yeah, I can't really explain why a deck so good is played so little. But you know, let's get into why Pearly is so good. So first of all, you know, what Pearly does is pretty degenerate in that Sleeping Memory, you know, draws cards during your opponent's standby phase, and because of Pearly Eep and non-once per turn stuff, you get the draw effect twice. Oftentimes you will have 2 to 3 Pearly Memories equipped under your Baby Noir, which means that during your opponent's standby phase, you're drawing 4 to 6 cards usually. Which, in case you didn't know, this game has Max E legal, so the fact that you can just draw 4 to 6 cards on your opponent's turn and draw into a Max E is one of the most degenerate things that you can do in this game still, including all the U-Bell end boards, including Fire King end boards. Draw 6 during your opponent's turn is still among the most degenerate things you can do. Also, because Pearly is so under the radar now and underrated, and you know, why would you prepare for Pearly if nobody's even playing Pearly? People aren't running outs to X Pearly Noir. They're not running hard outs. Like in terms of things that actually out Noir like directly, the most common thing that people will run out is Underworld Goddess, which is below 20% usage rate. And you know, getting to Goddess while you have Noir in the field itself is a challenge because, you know, Noir has quick play spins anyways, but over 80% of decks are not playing Underworld Goddess. And this is by far the most played out to Pearly, because there's not a single, well, I'm not going to say there's not a single deck, but most decks are not even thinking of Kaijus. Like, Kaiju is not even a consideration. And, you know, Santa Claus is not a consideration. Lava Golems are not that common because, you know, Lava Golem, unfortunately, is a fire, so that plays not too well into the fire decks. Kurikara, which is a searchable card off the Snake Eye engine. Nobody is running Kurikara as a search target in Snake Eyes anymore, really. Cards like Book of Eclipse and Red Reboot to stop the Per Eep even are just generally not being played that much because they're not that good of board breakers, and back row decks are not the main concern right now. Between Fire King Snake Eyes and Yubel and Voiceless Voice, you have one total back row that they search as Disruption that's a trap card, so Red Reboot is not exactly the most worth it, so very rarely are people going to have outs, even have a way to stop your ETH from summoning the Expert Inar on your opponent's turn. And also, you know damn well people are not playing Thrust to search Herald of the Abyss this format, so that's another strong out Inar that you just don't have to worry about. And back to the max C point, Pearly is also possibly one of the best decks at playing into Maxi. Basically, if you open 2 quick play spells, you can get to Eep Pearly Noir, set Eep, by giving your opponent a single draw. And then for that one single draw, you're getting an Eep Pearly Noir with 2 to 3 Sleepy Marines underneath it. That's going to go into an Eep Pearly Noir, Expert Noir, and your opponent's turn with Eep. So yeah, honestly, half the time it's better to use Maxi not as a way to try to draw cards, but just to chain block the Eep Pearly Noir from attacking in an attempt to stop it from setting the Eep, even though that usually doesn't even work most of the time. So yeah, the fact that Pearly can usually laugh at the most common played card in Master Duel is definitely not something to underestimate. And also, it plays decently well. Even unlike most decks, Pearly even plays well going second into Maxi, because you're doing most of your lethal pushes and your big plays in the battle phase, so you don't even have to worry about stuff like Nibiru. You don't have to worry about cards like Veiler that they draw or stuff like that. And yeah, now this isn't the perfect deck, you know. This deck, because, you know, as you can see, there are a few limitations on this deck already, namely, like, it has a few less copies of Delicious Memories, and Pearly being semi-limited is honestly a bigger hit than the Pearlily being semi-limited. So sometimes you will have hands that are weak to hand traps. Basically, most of them are just hands that you don't have access to Street in. So if you don't have Street, then your Pearlily becomes a huge choke point for cards like Inperm and Veiler. And, you know, the Street is only at 3, so you're not gonna open this every game. So there are gonna be hands where people play the Ghost Trick engine to, you know, help mitigate the weakness sometimes, but then that's a completely different build, and you're taking up non-engine slots to run the Ghost Trick engine. It still might be worth it, maybe not. It's up for you to decide. And also, you know, along the same lines, playing into boards without Street is also a struggle, because you're using basically 2 cards for every 1 starter you have. So like, you're going to use your quick play spell, then you're going to discard a card to summon like your cat out. But if you don't have Street out, then that makes it very vulnerable to, again, just besides hand traps, now it's also vulnerable to stuff like Rage from Yubel, and, you know, Fire King's Disruptions and stuff like that, like Skyburn. And yeah, basically, if you don't draw a Street, your hands are much more fragile. Which and Street is a card that this deck has to depend pretty heavily on drawing. And you know, another note is, this might just be a skill issue on my part, but I find Pearly a very difficult deck to play. I find it much harder to play than the previous 2 decks I mentioned. In fact, I think out of the 5 decks I'm mentioning in this video, Pearly is probably the hardest to play, in my opinion. There's so many things you have to keep track of, especially when you go second, because every card you have has multiple effects that you always have to use. You know, pre-memory, besides special summoning a Pearly monster, it lets you suck your opponent's monster, so sometimes you have to decide, you have to think about which cards you want to sack in order to threaten sucking your opponent's monsters, and then also, you know, you have to use Eat Pearly Beauty to trade with your opponent's interactions sometimes. Then you have like Eat Happy Memory, and then Happiness. Happiness has like a ability to deal with back throw, but you know, then you have to keep that in mind, and then and then enter the battle phase, you have to keep in mind your attack order. If you're going for game, you have to keep track of how much attack your opponent's monsters have, and like how many attacks you have off of your happy memories, or like sometimes you have to crash your own monster into your opponent's monster so you can get the add back of your quick play spells off the My Friend Pearly. Every decision you make has like 2 to 3 different options that you can do, and like every card in your hand is usually live, because you can just play like, as long as you have quick play spells in your hand, you can continue playing cards from your hand. So yeah, I fumbled the bag so much when I played this deck, playing into boards. And like, in my opinion, this is, out of all the decks here in this video, Pearly is probably the deck that I would suggest most for experienced players mainly, and or you know, if you've had previous experience with Pearly and for some reason you drop the deck for a little bit, this deck's still good. It's just the better the pilot, the more you will get out of this deck. Now we're getting to a deck that's really, really under the radar in terms of play rate and popularity. Since according to win rate, it's similar to decks like Math Mech and Rescue Ace, as previously mentioned. However, the Mannadium usage rate is so damn low. Like, it's half of that of a Pearly. In fact, it doesn't even register as one of the top 20 most played decks on the Master Duel meta popularity charts. So, you know, that should just clue you in on how little this deck is played. Even though the win rate is, again, solid and on par with the other decks that I put on this list. So, what's the advantage of playing Mannadium? Well, Mannadium, you know, obviously it's a want mo combo deck. It has the classic auto win end board when it full combos going first. You know, if you think the U-Bell end board is oppressive, well, I mean, the Mannadium end board is basically the U-Bell end board plus, you know, with 2 Omni Negates on it, one of which is a counter trap. So really, once the Mannadium player full combos, you are just not beating this end board in like any universe. Your board breakers won't work. They lose to your counter trap. You know, you have to hand trap Mannadium so to the point where they can't set up their full board. Otherwise, you lose. And even then, when you hand trap your Mannadium half the time, it doesn't even work unless it's maxi. Because Mannadium, as long as it's not playing into some kind of floodgate hand trap like Maxi or Droll, then the 1-for-1 hand traps like Veiler, Ash, Imperm, this deck can play through it pretty decently. Oftentimes, if you draw like Reinhardt or Calarium as your starter, like you're already doing a combo that completely plays around Nibiru. And then, you know, if you try to stop if you try to hit any part of the combo with like normal hand trap like Imperm or Ash, you will, at most, you will probably get rid of 1, maybe 2 interruptions sometimes. But again, the end board has like 7 interruptions, so that's the fact that Mannadium can still end on a board with like Baron, Dissipator, either your pick of Appaloosa or Sprite Elf reviving Ivy Masquerena to go into an SP or Appaloosa on your opponent's turn, and then, you know, you do have non-engine this deck as well. So yeah, it's just, this deck is one of the stronger decks in the format going first. It's been that way basically since it came, basically all the support came out, like the Crimson Dragon and the Mannadium, Reinhardt, and the Calarium stuff, but that's still the case now. And even if you don't full combo, this deck has a super strong follow-up, you know, that rivals that of Snake Eyes sometimes, because along the way you're making light hearts twice. So you're searching 2 right phobias because light heart is not a hard once per turn, so you're gonna always have right phobia for follow-up. You're most likely going to draw a card off of right heart as another form of follow-up, and Arrival is not a once per turn at all. The fact that you have additional copies of like Obsidian to get free summons next turn. You have Samsara and Starfrost, which just represent more Ash Clouds to throw at your opponent, which, Ash Cloud is literally just a free summon that also breaks your opponent's boards. And the fact that Dissipator recycles your Ash Clouds and recycles your Visas cards by negating and using its disruption effect is huge. Like, even if you end up breaking the Mannadium end board, which, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to, but even if you do that 1 time out of 10, you're gonna get drowned by the 3 to 4 free bodies that this deck searched for follow-up too. So yeah. Now, obviously, this deck is, I wouldn't classify this deck as tier 1 or even probably tier 2 because we're playing Master Duel, and unfortunately this is one of those decks that just completely dies to Maxi. Out of all the decks that I list here, this is the deck that is by far the weakest in the Maxi. You cannot really put up any form of interruption. It takes you like 3 summons to make 1 interruption off the Maxi. Like, it's just so bad. The only advantage is that most of the time people will max you preemptively because all your summons are just inherent summons, like Link summons and stuff like that, so you don't give them 1 draw immediately, but you do kind of have to stop from there and just pray you like open like, I don't know, a tactics to maybe hand loop them and try to live the next turn. But yeah, it's not great, and also you're weak to Droll, but Droll isn't as a problem this format. I don't think it's that common as compared to like a Maxi. And sometimes the hands of this deck are awkward because even though you're running like 2 copies of Phobia for follow-up and 2 Arrival for follow-up, and so that Arrival isn't a Garnet, drawing these cards without your combo pieces is not that good. Like, if you open Arrival but no level 4 normal summon, well, this card doesn't do anything. If you open Phobia, it's kind of pointless. It's like a dead card in hand because you're gonna search Phobia during your combo anyways, and then you search 2 during your combo most of the time already, so the fact that if you draw 1, you just lose 1 free card. That could have been anything else. If you don't draw Rhymeheart or Calarium, then your combos do tend to be weaker. Like, Rhymeheart and Calarium are your most real 1-card combos, and they facilitate your best 2-card combos. Whereas, a 1-card right-card combo doesn't lead you to like any of the broken stuff like this Fader or like Elf or IP or like even Appaloosa. Most of the time you're gonna top out at SP plus Baron if you don't access your Mannadium monsters, which, SP plus Baron now is not that strong of an end board. It's pretty easy for most decks to play through just that. And speaking of bricks, Mannadium, you have to run 3 of this because you're going through 3 during your combo. But if you draw 2 of this, it's terrible. Like, you not only do you have to cut your combo off like short or like play your combo very unsafely, it's not a good card to draw to have multiple things because you can only special summon it once from your hand. And same goes with Visa's Starfrost. If you don't have a normal summon, again, it's really a lot of your cards depend on you drawing your normal summons, and if you just happen to not draw one of your 6 copies of them, your hands get a bit more awkward. There's that. Also, annoyingly enough, this deck has anti-synergy with hand traps, namely Ash Blossom and Valor, because of these cards are tuners, and Calarium has a effect that attack modulates and gives your monsters 100 attack with tuner engraved. And why is that bad? Well, because Mannadium's Meek Summoning Condition requires specific stats. It requires a monster with 1500 or 2100. 1500 attack, 2100 defense. If you have a tuner engraved with Calarium on the field, then suddenly your Rhymehearts and your Rhymehearts no longer fit the criteria, and your Meek no longer turns to your extender, and that's just annoying as hell. It's to a point where I consider just not running Valor, just to avoid that confliction, and that's why you see tactics in here. And Ash, you have to run Ash because Maxi is in the game, but also those like 10 to 15% of your hands, Ash is just going to conflict with Calarium sometimes, and that's annoying as hell. So yeah, this is not a perfect deck, obviously. It's not like tier 1 or anything, but I think in terms of how little this deck is played and how high the win rate is, this is definitely one of the most underrated decks. And finally, we have, in my opinion, the most underrated Master Duel deck for September, which is Sprite. And it's a combination of its usage rate and popularity and its win rate. Sprite, out of the 5 decks I've shown, Sprite is only ahead of Mannadium in terms of usage rate. It has lower usage rate than the other 3 decks I mentioned. It is also not one of the 20 most played or most popular decks according to Master Duel meta, but its win rate is very respectable. In fact, its win rate is as high as Pearly is, which, as I mentioned, Pearly has one of basically the highest win rates out of all decks in Master Duel. So the Sprite is right up there with Pearly, so that's impressive. And unlike the other decks in this video, such as Mathmech, Rescue Ace, or Pearly, there was a large period of time where Sprite as a deck just saw no play or almost no play as a whole. It's only very recently, in like the past few months, basically since Jet came from 1 to 2, that Sprite has even seen this little amount of play at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if you really didn't play a Sprite deck in months, or only play like a couple Sprite decks over the course of a few months, because that's just how uncommon Sprite was. Now it's still, I mean, it's still pretty uncommon, but it's not. It is now a deck that you can expect to see occasionally. And I know there's a lot of quote-unquote Sprite deck lists that are literally just U-Bell with a few cards, Sprite cards splashed in, and then, you know, a Sprite Elf to do Sprite plays on top of your U-Bell stuff. But I mean, that's not the main focus that I want to focus on with Sprite. I'm mainly focusing on builds such as this that are more pure. Either this, or, you know, there's certain Tri-Brigade builds. There's a couple different Sprite builds you can try out. But this build in particular, one of the benefits of this deck, and unlike, you know, all of the other decks I mentioned in this video, is that this is a deck that can run Shifter, and, you know, we all know how strong Shifter is in a format with U-Bell, and Fire King as the best deck, you know, seems pretty obvious. And I know the Hero Kit inclusion looks weird, but I mean, trust me, this works. If you draw it, you just link it off or ride it with Elf, and then you get 2 free bodies to link with or exceeds with. If you don't draw this, then that's fine. That means you just summon it from your deck with Gigantic Sprite, and then you get the 2 extra link material and 2 level 2 bodies. That way, I mean, it's not actually a brick as I've learned about this card as I've played this deck. And yeah, Dark Beckoning Beast has been basically overtaken as the best normal summon for Sprite now, because, you know, like Nimble Beaver is still at 1. So Dark Beckoning Beast, normal summon it, gets you your opening Sphere Gates, opening gets another Dark Beckoning Beast, then that represents your 2 bodies right there. And if you can link it off further and then revive it, that gets you potentially 3 bodies. And now there's, with the updated card pool and new packs, we have more ways to search Dark Beckoning Beast. You know, you can search it traditionally with Period Rise Map, but now you can also search it with Nightmare Throne, and, you know, throw your opponent for a loop when you go Nightmare Throne to add Dark Beckoning Beast and do full Sprite combo instead of U-Bell, thinking they're you know, thinking they're safe or whatever. And yeah, obviously Sprite, another advantage is that it's very strong into hand traps. Again, if you literally draw any of these extenders or like Sprite starter, like, or even just hard opening at the Spirit Gates with additional copies of extenders, then your opponent, not only are hand traps ineffective, like, your opponent is put in a bind, because it's like, oh, do I hand trap the Sprite Blue or the Sprite Jet and prevent a search, but then they get to just resolve Gigantic freely? Or do I hold my hand trap for the Gigantic, but then their Blue or their Jet are just going to search like a Carrot or a Red or a Sprite Starter, and then just negate my hand trap anyways, right? So yeah, I mean, yeah, the Sprite was always good at playing through hand traps. It's just with a lot of limitations, it became less likely that you were going to draw extenders. But now if you run multiple copies of Red and you with Jet at 2 now, and with all the searchable copies of Dark Magni Beast, you are more likely to be able to play through hand traps than not now. And of course, this is a Sprite deck, and Sprite always has room to play tons of non-engine. As you can see, we're playing 15 hand traps in this build, and literally you can even go further. Like if you don't want to run all of these ways to search Dark Beckoning Beast, you can just play more hand traps, and then it's like you're in math mech level of the amount of hand traps you can run. So yeah, I think, and this Sprite is a very straightforward deck to play. So if you're like more of a beginner, or you don't like playing like combo decks like U-Bell, or you don't want to play something like Pearly, Sprite is a perfectly capable, very simple, very straightforward deck to play. Now, like the cons is that this has always been a Sprite problem, is that Sprite is not very good playing going second. You pretty much need to hand trap your opponents so that they don't end on any type of board. Otherwise, your deck is very normal summoner line. If your Dark Beckoning Beast or like your normal summon gets outed or removed, then all of these cards you see here, all blue, Jet, red, carrot, all of these cards are immediately dead because now you don't have a body. So you really have to, if your normal summon gets removed going second, you're in trouble. Basically, it's starter or bust at that point, and then your opponent has interruption for starter too, or they could have something as simple as an Ash, and then suddenly, like, just two forms of interruption. Which 2 interruptions is, most boards put up like 3, 4, 5 plus forms of interruption. So like the fact that you can get shut off with only 2 while you draw literally the best extend in your deck, that's not great for your efforts going second. And another thing is that Sprite is not the best into Maxi. It's not as bad as some of the decks that I listed here, like Mannadium, for example, but it's not great. You're gonna have to end your combo early. You can't do. I would not advise going into Gigantic or Sprite Elf if you do get Maxi. Settle on either one like red or carrot into your hand traps and pray at that point. And also, this deck has probably the lowest ceiling out of all the decks I mentioned here in terms of its end board. Specifically, if you don't draw one of your good cards, like one of your Dark Beckoning Beast or your Sprite Blue, because the most interruption you can typically get on your end board is Elf, IP, Melfi of the Forest, which isn't really an interruption, that just searches Caddy, and then potentially a Gen Buster. So maxed out your end board with a build like this is like 4 interruptions on board plus hand traps, which is not bad. But the moment you get hand trapped a little bit, or you don't open Dark Beckoning Beast, like a Dark Beckoning Beast is a normal summon that gets you 2 bodies. If you don't do this, or if you have this special Sprite Blue from your deck with Gigantic instead of Hero Kid, which then cost you 2 bodies so you didn't hard draw the Sprite Blue or just the Jet, then you lose even one of those interruptions. You're probably not going to be able to get the Gin Bust, for example. Then you're relying on IP plus Caddy, and then the double interruption off SP plus all your hand traps to get you through. And that's, well, 2 to 3 interruptions it's okay. I mean, clearly that's when the previous deck Mannadium ended on like 7 interruptions plus Omni Negates. This is definitely a few power levels lower in terms of end board. But I mean, still, given the fact that Sprite was a deck that was basically extinct for a long period of time, and now has climbed its way up to be one of the highest win rate decks in the game while still not seeing that much play, like, I think this definitely deserves its spot as like the most underrated deck for this format. So if you don't want to play Snake Eyes Fire Kings and you don't want to play U-Bell, try one of these decks this format. I promise you won't be too disappointed. And of course, if you have any other decks you think are underrated for this meta, please drop them in the comments and let me know.